Welcome to the Cardboard Crash Course. My name's Ethan, and I'm going to be talking about the Towering Roots of the Jungle in this spirit study today. So this is a spirit from the Nature Incarnate expansion. It's a new one that uses an Incarna as well as a new token type. Now this Wilds we've seen before, but this Vitality is specific to this and a couple of aspects from previous spirits, all used in the Nature Incarnate expansion there. It has a playstyle that's incredibly good at protecting things where it has its Incarna and can draw invaders there, but it's constrained where it can move it and has some ability to remove invaders, but not until later. Now, it has a complexity of moderate. I want to put like an asterisk there because I've personally had kind of some issues mastering this here. It's a very strange spirit in the way it works, and its defense rating is absolutely through the roof. A little bit of control, but basically bare minimum everything else. It doesn't really have any inherent way other than one mediocre innate power, as we'll see in the front, to destroy or remove anything on the board. Basically, it's going to be all about prevention. And when we get to the front here, I'll explain how all these tokens are going to work together to do that. But first, how we set up. We're going to put 3 presents on the starting board, 1 in the highest number jungle without blight, 1 in the highest number mountain, and 1 in the highest number wetland. And then you put your Incarna in that jungle that we place the presents in. You also then start off with your 4 unique power cards, no energy, and you're going to want to place those Vitality tokens off to the side here. They'll be something you need all the way through the game there. All right, and then this is the front of the board where we're going to spend the rest of the game with. I wanted to talk about this first special rule before we get into anything else here. Some of your actions add Vitality tokens, like spoken about. Now those Vitality tokens have an inherent ability to them. Each Vitality in a land with no blight prevents a blight from being added, then is removed. So it's kind of like a really strong version of a Strife, but only in a land that didn't already have any blight in it. This is a fantastic way of preventing things from happening, even if the invaders absolutely destroy a land. Now, because it has that weird restriction of only working in lands that aren't blighted, it's going to be kind of difficult to master. And that's where I think the moderate level of this is a little deceiving. Because sure, it's not too difficult to get into, but to actually do things correctly with, it's going to be really interesting, to say the least. Now our second special rule is Heart Tree guards the land. You have an Incarna, which is this. Now those of you who don't know what an Incarna is, some spirits have these. Now they all work differently. Most is presence. This works as presence here. It works differently whether it's unempowered or empowered. Now both of them are going to be a single presence, which means that if you have your Incarna in the same place that you have a presence, a land with these two count as a sacred site. Keep that in mind. So, what does the Incarna do for you? Your powers get +1 range if the Incarna is the origin land. So something with 0 range that would only be able to target presence can now target all its adjacent lands, for example. Also, invaders, Dahan, and beasts cannot be damaged or destroyed at the Incarna. So it basically prevents anything from happening, essentially. When it's empowered, you're going to skip all the build actions. And in order to empower it, it has to be in a land with at least 3 Vitality the first time. Now, it never unempowers once it's empowered, so even if it's removed from the game and added back later, it always stays empowered the first time it's in that land. Now, you might be asking, why not just do that as soon as possible? Well, we'll get to that here in a bit. It's a little bit interesting and complex the way that works. So let's look at its growth options next here. It has 3 growth options and you pick one, like normal, but they're a little bit spread out. The first one's pretty simple. You're going to reclaim all of your power cards that you've used and add a presence at range 0. So that can be 0 away from your Incarna or any other presence at the board there. Basically, making a sacred site. The second one is gaining a power card, adding a presence at range 1, and then adding one of those Vitality tokens at your Incarna. So if you choose this 3 times, you'll be able to empower it and prevent build actions. This is a great way of spreading these Vitality out and using them. And really one of your only ways of doing it. One other is a power card we'll explain in a bit. And the third growth option is gaining a power card, adding a presence at range 3, which is very flexible, and then you can replace one presence with your Incarna and then gain an energy. So that energy is a little bit of gravy, and it'll help you do a couple of the power cards we start with, but really this add a presence and then replace that presence with your Incarna, which can be the same one you just added or one that's already on the board. This is the only way to move your Incarna inherently without some sort of other effect from a power card in the deck that can move presence. Because this counts as a presence, any of those abilities can also target it, but you can always choose for it not to count as a presence if you don't want it to. It's a very sort of stuck in the ground Incarna, almost completely opposite as the one we checked out last, the Ember-Eyed Behemoth, which is incredibly mobile. So the fact that it has an add presence on all three options is really nice because you're always going to be consistently uncovering your presence tracks. And let's look at those now. So these tracks are actually really good. You start at 1 energy and 1 card play a turn, and you end at 6 and 4. 6 is a little bit higher than the average, and 4 is pretty much right at average. But you're going to get some really decent elements on the way. 2 plants, a sun, and an earth to help you with both of your innates here. The only thing you're missing are these moons, but your cards will help you get there too. Because you're constantly placing those presents, you're going to be able to get to pretty much either one of these pretty quickly, but you don't have an option where you place 2. So unless you have some kind of proliferation effect in the game, you're not really going to be able to add them too often there. Now let's look at those innate powers. First we have Shelter Under Towering Branches. This is a slow speed, 0 range from a sacred site and can target any land there. If you have a sun and a plant, you gather up to 1 Dahan. If you add another plant and an earth, you gather up to 1 explorer. Another plant and a sun, gather up to 1 town, and then another one of each, and you gather up to 1 city. So this is basically bringing everything into your Incarna or a different sacred site, and that's because no matter what happens to those lands with the vitality, even if everything is in that land, no blight is going to be added, as well as the second ability where no Dahan or invaders can be destroyed, even if they're all together at your Incarna. So this is kind of the way of preventing anything from happening. It's sort of like a Ravage skip, all in one. You're not actually destroying anything or advancing the game state, you're just completely nullifying things. For those of you who have played Twilight Imperium, I definitely consider these guys close to the Extra Kingdom. Our second innate power, Revoke Sanctuary and Cast Out, it's only okay, so let's check it out. Another slow speed, range 0 from a sacred site, just like the other one, and it does have a restriction that it has to be with your Incarna and invaders. There's no getting around this. You have to target this land, and it has to also have invaders at it. So 1, 1, 2, you're going to generate a fear and then remove either an explorer or a town. 2, 1, 3, another fear and remove another one. And then 2, 2, 4, you're going to generate a third fear and remove any one invader. So that can be a city or whatever you need it to be. Again, really, really decent, but the fact that this is a pretty high threshold and you have to target the land with your Incarna means that you'll be utilizing this growth option quite a bit, moving your Incarna exactly where you need, and hopefully moving it to the land that you've brought everybody to in order to then switch over to this. The good thing is a lot of these elements overlap, so the only thing that you're going to be missing here are the moons or the earth. And if you can get to that really high card plays or be able to proliferate any sort of way into that, then this is going to be a little bit easier for you. I think this is all pretty straightforward, but a little bit difficult to master. Where the real difficulty comes in are the power cards. So let's check those out here. First, we have Boon of Resilient Power. So this is a boon, which means that it's going to target any spirit. It has 1 cost and it's a slow power. It has Sun, Moon, Water, and Plant, that water being a flex element there. Target spirit may add 1 destroyed presence to one of your lands. If you target yourself, you gain a major power. Otherwise, they gain any power card they want. So getting a major power off of this might sound nice, but be careful doing it early game or in a solo game, because it's going to be pretty difficult to get rid of your innate powers in order to get even the best major powers there early. especially because you kind of have a slow growth in terms of energy gain. The second one is our other way of adding vitality here. It's a zero cost, slow power with 1 range away from a sacred site, sun, air, earth, and plant. If no blight is present, add a vitality. Or if no invaders are present, add a wilds. And then if you have 3 plants, you can do both. It's a little restrictive where you can't add the vitality if there's already a blight, but I don't know why you would want to do that anyway, considering this here. A great thing to do with this is to get a card out of the deck early on, using one of these 2 gain power card options, to get a gather or remove blight option for this spirit. That's going to be an absolute must-have there. Our next one, Entwine the Fates of All, is going to be 1 cost, fast power, one of its 2 fast powers here, moon, water, earth, and plant, and it targets any spirit once again. In one of target spirit's lands, defend 2 per presence, and that per presence means from all spirits. So if 3 different spirits had 1 presence, you're going to defend 6. This is a fantastic way of just nullifying so many different lands worth of destruction here, and really probably its most powerful ability in general. And finally, we have Radiant and Hallowed Grove, a 2 cost fast power that targets the land specifically with your Incarna in it. It has sun, moon, fire, and plant, so helping out with the second one a little bit. It gives you 2 fear if invaders are present or adjacent. In both target and one adjacent land, you can remove an invader with health less than or equal to the terror level. So this is once again a decent, mediocre way of removing an invader and generating fear. These 2 powers together are the only way you're going to be able to generate fear, because the removal part of each of these means that you're not actually destroying those towns and cities, so you won't be generating fear off of the removal. It's kind of like they're just disappearing into the jungle and they never existed in the first place. It doesn't cause too much panic from the invaders otherwise. So what are some options with this spirit? You have kind of 2 different ways of playing. My first way of playing is that I like to just add a ton of vitality with this second growth option and flip the Incarnas to prevent build actions as soon as possible. This is okay, but it's better in co-op games than it is in solo games. And the reason is because you're adding all the vitality to 1 single land and you don't have any other inherent ways of doing damage outside of that land to prevent ravages, you're going to be really committing on 1 single land there. The only way that that's going to be really useful is if you're playing like Prussia, where multiple explorers can explore the same land even in the first couple of turns, and in that case, sure, hunker down on 1. But other than that, you are going to want to spread out in a solo game to protect your entire board. In that case, you're going to have to utilize this third growth option as much as possible. Don't be worried about replacing your presence with your Incarna, because when you replace that presence, it goes to your destroyed supply, which means that you can always bring it back with this Boon of Resilient Power or any other Add Destroyed Presence card. You're going to have to be okay with removing those, teleporting this around your board, and just kind of accepting that you won't be too mobile and you're just bringing things together in order to cancel it out completely. Really, its win conditions come from the power card deck. Because you're not generating too much fear, so you're not advancing the terror level in a solo game, and you're not really advancing the game state, you're just preventing things from happening with these tokens, you're going to have to find a way out of these 2 to just slow down the game to a halt until you can fish for a power card that will end it all. Even cards in the major power deck, such as Trees Radiate Celestial Brilliance, even though it matches up exactly with your elements, it's just also preventing things from happening. You're going to want to get cards more like Manifest Incarnation and just slowly build up energy in order to do that tons of terror and destruction there. You're really banking off the fact that you're going to be able to slowly grow into one of those, but you definitely have the best nullification abilities in the game, so I wouldn't be too worried. You're going to take a couple of blight in lands that you can't get those vitality to, but at a certain point you'll be able to get into a rhythm of this second growth option where you're just grabbing 1 power card, playing one card a turn and just preventing things with your Incarna as long as you move it there. So you'd just be going back and forth on these until you finally need to do this first growth option here. The final thing I want to talk about is that setup. It's the only spirit in the game that adds its presence to 3 different lands to begin with. This board was a little bit restrained that I showed you during this setup because all 3 of them are right next to each other. But when that's not the case, you're going to be all over your board, and this 3 presence is going to help you move your Incarna all around using this third option without feeling too guilty about it. You will have to use these add presence options to build sacred sites because both of your innate powers as well as a couple of your power cards use the sacred sites, but your Incarna is never a sacred site by itself. Is this hard to play? No. But is this hard to master? Absolutely. Those of you who will love defensive playstyles or just don't like seeing the invaders destroy things but don't mind seeing them grow really large, go ahead and play Towering Roots of the Jungle. I think you'll have a ton of fun. The only thing I wouldn't suggest, don't give this to a player for their first time using an Incarna. I think this is a very odd way, compared to the others, of using that Incarna ability, so maybe don't stick this to a new guy, even though it says moderate. Well, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your experience with Towering Roots of the Jungle, and have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye-bye.